Hi, I'm Katie and this is Joshua, and welcome back to the Bucket List Life. Today we are going to recap one of my favorite vacations ever. That is our honeymoon to Costa Rica.
So we went to Costa Rica at the end of July 2021. We flew from Dallas to Houston and from Houston to San Jose. And this was your first time out of the country.
It was a whole new experience and something that I highly suggest. If you've never been out of the country, take the plunge, get your passport and go somewhere, because it really opens your eyes to a new culture, a new environment, and it was really beneficial just for myself. I know.
We decided it was either going to be a guided tour or a full-on adventure. So we decided to go on a full-on adventure. We rented a car, arrived there probably about 8 or 9 o'clock at night.
In San Jose.
And from the start, we're driving down the road, I look over at Katie, and Katie has like this fear in her eyes because, well, for one, we're in the city at night. There's some party scenes going on, and Katie was like, getting worried, and I was like, oh my goodness, I made the wrong decision bringing Katie over here. This is the first time out of the country.
It was definitely worth renting a car and doing a self-guided exploration of the country. We got to explore 2 cities, so a volcano city and a beach city, and just having that flexibility of the independent exploration was definitely worth it. Don't get caught up in those flashy tours that are really expensive and there's so many options. You can do it yourself.
That's where renting a vehicle really came in handy, because we could go off the beaten path a little bit and explore and drive around. I think that was, for me, that was the funnest part.
But you do have to do your research before you do that. And I know Joshua, he planned the trip completely and researched about the rental car, and so he had to research COVID procedures, and so time and research that goes into it when you do an independent exploration.
I don't know what the restrictions are right now, but back then you needed travel insurance. So just make sure you know where you're going and what kind of requirements is needed.
So we drove to La Fortuna, which is a volcano town, a volcano called Arenal. You rented a little Airbnb, correct?
Yeah, I rented a little Airbnb right next to the volcano. It was really close to the volcano, so we had a beautiful view of the volcano.
And it was beautifully landscaped. There was this little patio area and this garden and these beautiful plants just lining the sidewalks, and even a little mini hiking trail out behind the Airbnb. Oh, it was just beautiful, and it rained, I think, maybe even the first night. And we just sat out on that back porch and just watched the rainforest just come alive. It was amazing.
Where we stayed at was right outside of the city, so we would go back into the city to eat and to walk around the town. And we also decided to go kayaking off of the lake next to the volcano.
We had this amazing tour guide, and he was so friendly. He really kind of made it personal, and he kind of went at our pace. I'm obviously a slower kayaker than Joshua and the tour guide, but he kind of slowed down for us and was giving us tips about the city, and it was just really nice until the bottom fell out and it just started pouring, which we had expected it to rain. We were going actually in their rainy season in the rainforest, so we were prepared. We bought a poncho, rain jackets. We even bought a waterproof cover to cover our backpack. But when that rain came,
when it rained, it poured over there.
It poured, and especially during that kayaking trip, it was we got wet. Everything was drenched, and it was just like we were paddling. We continued kayaking to that volcano. It's like the rain was not going to stop us.
Our tour guide was like, "You want to keep going?" We're like, "We're going." So just be prepared in the rain, that the rain is coming, and bring a poncho, bring maybe some extra pairs of socks, maybe some extra pair of shoes. Wear sandals or something, be prepared to be walking in puddles. From the kayaking journey, our tour guide actually gave us a good tip to go to a hot springs. They have a lot of hot springs lining the volcano. So some of these are resorts, but then he showed us a location where there's a free hot springs. You just go up, walk through the jungle. So after we dropped off the kayaks, Katie and I, we drove back to that location where the tour guide showed us, and we ended up spending some time in the hot spring, and it was totally worth it.
Most definitely. If we would have gone upstream just a few hundred yards, we would have had paid like $80 per person to experience the same hot springs that was just 200 yards down. So it was a really cool experience. It's very relaxing.
And I'll leave a link in the description below where that location is. From the hot springs, I think the next day we went to coffee and
cocoa and sugarcane. So
yeah.
all three of those items are essential and very paramount to Costa Rica's economy. And it was really cool to see how those things are harvested and then processed to get ready to sell. And I know one of the things that stood out in my mind was the cocoa beans. So I've always thought cocoa beans were brown, and they were about this big and kind of brown and powdery, and that's just what I've always just assumed cocoa beans were like. And I couldn't be more wrong. And apparently they come in this large kind of oval shell, and when you crack that open, the cocoa beans in their raw form are white and slimy. And they even let us sample those, and it had this kind of this mild tang and sweet flavor, and it was so unexpected and enjoyable.
The one that we went to, and I'll leave a link in the description below of that one also, it's very hands-on. The people were super friendly. The coffee was amazing. So definitely check them out. There's plenty of other cocoa and coffee tours that are, I'm sure, just as good, but this one we can vouch for.
And the people were just so nice too.
Yeah.
So the next attraction that we visited was the volcano. So instead of kayaking to the volcano, we decided to hike the volcano. However, we weren't allowed to go all the way to the top. There was like a halfway point where they said no more tourists can go beyond this point. But still, that journey was very memorable as well, because once again, it started pouring rain. And we remember, like, we were prepared. We like we said, we did our research. We had the gear. The couple in front of us, though, were not. There was this girl in front of us trying to hike this volcanic rock in flip-flops. And then suddenly, her flip-flop broke. So you can tell it was one of those cheap, like, dollar flip-flops. And you know how the strap can come out of those flip-flops, and it did. And she looked at us and she's like, "Do you have anything that could help me?" And I knew it was in my backpack, and I thought, and I was like, "No, I don't." And I felt so bad because I wanted to help her, but I couldn't think of anything to give her that it would help. And we actually ran into her again, and she had found just a little hair tie. So she strapped her hair tie to the bottom of the flip-flops to secure it around her foot. But don't be in that situation.
And the location that you get to is kind of like a little higher than everything else, so you can see, you have a really good view of the volcano, a really good view of the lake, and it was
the lake.
highly worth going on that hike. And
it was actually a memorial.
Yeah.
The highest point that they allow you to go to, they established a memorial because in 1968 the volcano erupted and it killed almost 100 people. And this memorial is this beautiful garden, and they have this little coffee shop, and it's just beautiful. And when I got there, I just want to stay here for hours because it was just so beautiful and relaxing.
And let me tell you, after hiking in the rain for like an hour, close to 2 hours, we were pretty wet too still, even with our ponchos, because like I said, the bottom fell out, and your poncho is only going to help you so much. But like having a nice coffee sitting underneath the awning.
It was like a little pavilion thing.
Yeah, it was much needed reward for the end of a hike like that.
And that wasn't the only climbing experience we did in La Fortuna. We also visited one of the La Fortuna's waterfall. And this, I don't know if I'd ever seen a legitimate waterfall before. In Texas that I live, that's not common at all. And this one was massive. However, to get down to the base of the waterfall, you had to descend so many stairs. And I thought, oh, well, we were never going to get down there. But we finally did, and it was so worth it. The water was so clear, and the water flowing was so harsh that they said you can't go to the very base of the waterfall.
I think typically you can go there, but because the water was such a heavy flow when we went.
But we did get to see it pretty closely, and the water was so clear. Joshua even stuck his GoPro camera down under the water, and he was able to clearly see this little school of fish swim beside us, and I thought that was just so neat.
I think if you go when they're in season, they have an
orchid
orchid trail
and then like a butterfly trail that pairs with it.
I don't know exactly when that's in season, but I would research that and see when that's in season. That would be an icing on the cake.
So the waterfall concluded our stay in La Fortuna, and we just loved that little town. We were kind of sad to go, but the following city that we traveled to was a beach town, which had a completely different vibe than the volcano town.
Subscribe for next week's video as we head down to Manuel Antonio and Rainmaker Park. Thanks for watching.